Howdy rock buddies, it's Papa. Good to be talking to you again, and I hope you're doing very well. We've been talking about igneous rocks and their metamorphic equivalents. We talked about felsic igneous rocks and their metamorphic equivalents. We talked about intermediate igneous rocks and their metamorphic equivalents, and we talked about mafic rocks and their metamorphic equivalents. Well, right now we're going to talk about ultramafic rocks and their metamorphic equivalents, and that's going to end this series of videos. And I think on the next one I'm going to just provide you guys with photos of a ton of igneous and metamorphic rocks. But let's go ahead. As always, if you like this video and it's useful, please do subscribe because it super helps me. And also, if you have comments, I would love to hear them. Always glad to get comments. So let's go. Ultramafic igneous rocks and their metamorphic equivalents. Ultramafic rocks are relatively low in silicon. That'd be quartz. They are low in potassium and sodium. That would be potassium feldspar and sodium feldspar. They are moderately low in calcium. That would be calcium feldspar. And they are very high in iron and very high in magnesium. That would be pyroxene and olivene minerals. So where do ultramafic rocks come from? Well, this picture shows the two kinds of crust that exist on the earth. One is land crust, the other kind is ocean crust. Those are the only two crusts that I know about that are on earth. Those two kinds of crust are sitting on top of a molten but plastic hunk of rock, illustrated here by the orange color at the bottom. This orange stuff is called the mantle, and it is made up mostly of ultramafic rocks. This is an ultramafic rock called peridotite. If it has a lot of magnesium and olivine in it, it's called dunite. Peridotite/dunite is the most common rock type on planet Earth because the mantle is just so chock full of it. I collected this big hunk of peridotite/dunite from a place in the North Georgia mountains called the Popcorn Overlook. Okay, so if peridotite/dunite comes from the mantle, how in the world was I able to go to a place in North Georgia and pick up a hunk of it? Very good question. Have a look at this picture. You can see the continent on the left, and it's being pushed down by this island arc that's shoving up onto it. And right inside the middle of the yellow rectangle below where it says forebasin is a huge piece of mantle peridotite/dunite that's being shoved up onto the land, just the way a bulldozer shoves up a big hunk of dirt into a big pile. So it is continental crashing that brings mantle peridotite/dunite out from in the deep mantle and up onto land. The peridotite/dunite that's down in the mantle is at least 5 miles and even many more miles deep than that. It's under unbelievably tremendous pressures, and it's extremely hot, several thousand degrees Fahrenheit, but it is adjusted to that temperature pressure regime. On the other hand, when continental crashing occurs and the bulldozer effect reaches down and grabs a bunch of that mantle peridotite/dunite and shoves it up on land, those temperature pressure conditions radically change. And not only that, a whole bunch of ocean water is involved in that process. That brings about metamorphism of ultramafic rocks. So let's check that out. Here is a lovely specimen of ultramafic rock. I will call it serpentinite/soapstone. But really the most important thing to remember about ultramafic rocks that have been shoved up on land is they turn greenish and they get soft. Can you see those scratch marks in this rock? I did that with my thumbnail. It's that soft. Serpentinite is greenish, and it has a kind of scaly appearance that reminded some folks of the scales on a serpent. And it is soft. You can scratch it probably with your thumbnail, but for sure with a nickel coin. Here is a piece of soapstone, which is a whitish version of serpentinite, or you could say a whitish version of metamorphic ultramafic rock. It is soft like serpentinite, and like all of these rocks, all ultramafic rocks, it has a super high melting point. It takes a tremendous amount of heat to melt it. And so they make these marker crayons out of soapstone that are used by welders to mark their welding, and the flame or the heat from the welding device will not melt the mark. This photo shows places where the American Indians were cutting out bowls made of soapstone. They use these bowls for cooking because soapstone has a high melting point, and so it could withstand the heat of a fire. Here is asbestos, yet another form of ultramafic metamorphic rock. Because asbestos, like all ultramafic rocks, has a very high melting point, it's basically fireproof, and so in the past they made house siding and interior floor tiles out of asbestos. I worked in an office for 32 years that had asbestos floor tiles, but I'm of course fine. I'm fine now. Asbestos is still used today in brake shoes for automobiles because it can stand the tremendous heat that's generated when you stomp on your brakes. When ultramafic rocks get pushed up on land and turned into metamorphic rocks, they very often react with the host rocks, the rocks that they're shoved up into, and some very interesting new rock types and mineral types can develop. Let's have a look at some of them. One of the most striking results of the interaction of ultramafic rocks pushed up on land and the host rocks is corundum. It is aluminum oxide, and if only aluminum and oxygen are present, it's clear like this example. Corundum has a hardness second only to that of diamond. Diamond is 10 and corundum is 9 in hardness. For this reason, the clear kind of corundum has been used for sandpaper and other abrasive applications in industries. If the ultramafic rocks that are interacting with the host rocks contain the element chromium, then it could be added to the aluminum and oxygen to create a kind of corundum called ruby, the very well-known and well-loved gemstone. If the aluminum oxide of chromium is combined with elements from the ultramafic rocks like magnesium, titanium, and chromium, you can get the beautiful gem sapphire, and sapphire can come in a variety of colors depending on which of those elements it contains. Now, if the host rock that's nearby these ultramafic rocks contains a lot of muscovite and biotite, magnesium from the ultramafic rock can replace the potassium and sodium in the muscovite and biotite to form a weird mineral called vermiculite. And if you've ever bought potting soil from Lowe's or Home Depot, you know it contains these little silvery slivers of stuff called vermiculite. Why vermiculite? Because it is able to absorb and hold water very, very well. And I'm assuming that because the vermiculite has a lot of magnesium in it, that magnesium adds to the nutrient base of the plants that are planted in it. Here's a final example of how ultramafic rocks, when they're pushed up and interact with the host rocks, can form interesting things. This cool rock I collected from a place in Georgia called Burke's Mountain, which is a big hunk of ocean crust that contains ultramafic rocks. The geological manual for Burke's Mountain and its sister mountain, Dixie Mountain, call this specimen druzy quartz. And you can see the quartz. It's stained with some iron on the front of the specimen. Very pretty, I think. The brownish stuff behind this front of quartz is a mass of hematite iron and magnetite iron. These are the most common forms of iron. And I assume they got into this rock from the rich iron source of the ultramafic rocks. As you know, magnetite iron stands for magnet, and many of the specimens of this rock really do stick to a magnet. I think that's fantastic. Okay, rock buddies, that's the scoop on igneous ultramafic rocks and their metamorphic equivalents. I hope you enjoyed this, and if it was educational and informative, please do subscribe. And I always love to get comments on whatever's on your mind, so send those comments in, and I always answer every comment. So this is Papa wishing all my excellent rock buddies happy rock hunting. Papa out.